All right, in this video we're going to be looking at the quiz from lesson 5-6. So again, the order of your questions are going to be different from the order of mine. Let's start with the first one. So it asks us to find the inverse of this function. Remember, to find the inverse, your first step is to change this back into an equation where instead of having f of x, we have y equals, so it's going to be y equals the square root of x minus 3. Then the second step is we switch the values for x and y. So this will be x equals y minus 3. And now we want to solve this. And so I want to solve for y rather. I want to make sure I get the y by itself. So right now it's trapped underneath the radicals. So I'm going to square both sides to undo the radicals. So now we'd have x squared equaling y minus 3. And now we would just add 3 to both sides, and we would get x squared plus 3 equals y. So that's what the inverse would be. So then we would just use x squared plus 3 as your answer. All right, so this next one says use composition of functions, determine if the two functions are inverses of each other. So the way that we figure that out is we put function g into function f and then vice versa. So I'm going to start by putting function g into function f. So I'm going to take 2x minus 4 and put that into function f. So now we'd have 1/2. Now, I like to do this sometimes, so if you're struggling or forgetting to include different pieces, like maybe you forgot to include the plus 4, I like to write down what the equation is first with a big set of parentheses for where I'm going to put the other function. Because remember that value for x represents my input, so I'm going to input 2x minus 4 where that x was. And now I can simplify this. And so if I distribute the 1/2 through, 1/2 of 2 is 1, so we'd have x. Half of 4 is 2, so I get x minus 2 plus 4. Well, negative 2 plus 4 is a positive 2. So that would be our answer. And that does not equal x. So I don't have to do anything else. I know right away that these two are not inverses of each other. Because when I went to go simplify this, we did not get x as our answer. Now it says the inverse of this function is not a function. Or the inverse of this is not a function. To start out with, this is not a function, because where we have our x's, notice that we have repeats there. So we have 2, we have a 2 here, and so on. So all of those are 2's, so that means that this is not a function. But that's not what it's asking for. It's asking for is the inverse of this a function. So now we look at the y values. Because remember what the inverse is here, the domain and range switch. So the y values, -3, 5, 0, 3, and -5, there are no repeats there. So the inverse of that is a function. So this is a false statement. The inverse of this is a function. This is saying it's not, the inverse of that is not a function. All right, so this is just like the first one we did. We need to figure out if these two are inverses of each other using the composition of functions. So again, I'm going to put function g, which is 3 divided by 2 times x minus 12. I'm going to put that into function f. And so function f is to take 2/3 times our input and add 8. So as our input, I'm going to put that in now, 3 over 2x minus 12. Well, let's simplify that. So if I distribute the 2/3 through with 2/3 times 3/2, those would cancel each other out, leaving me with just x. And 2/3 of 12 would be 8. So we'd have x minus 8, and then we have that plus 8. Well, -8 plus 8 is obviously x. Well, that's a good thing. This simplifies to just be x. Now I got to check to make sure that it works when we put function f into function g. So function f, remember, is the 2/3 x plus 8. So I'm going to put that into function g. Function g says to take 3/2 times my input and subtract 12. Again, my input is the 2/3 x plus 8. So now I'm going to distribute the 3 over 2. I'm going to distribute the 3/2 through. So again, the 3/2 and the 2/3, those cancel each other out, leaving me with just x. And 3/2 times 8 would be 12, so that would be plus 12, and then we have minus 12. Well, 12 minus 12 is 0, so we're left with just x again here. So the fact that these simplify to both be just plain old x tells me that, yes, these are inverses of each other. And lastly, we want to find the inverse of this function. So again, we're going to rewrite that as y equals 1/4 x minus 3. So I'm going to switch the x and y around. So I'm going to change the x to be a y and change the y to be an x. And now I want to solve for y. There's a couple ways you can do that. I like to get rid of the fraction first. So I'm going to multiply everything by 4. So 4 times x would be 4x. 4 times 1/4 would just be 1 or 1y or just y. And don't forget to take 4 times 3, which is 12 if you do it this way. And now we just have to add 12 to both sides. So I get 4x plus 12 equals y. And so that would be my inverse, 4x plus 12. All right, so that's all you had to do for this quiz. There's just 5 questions, so relatively short. So hopefully that answered the questions that you might have gotten wrong. But again, if you do have any questions on any of those, please make sure to reach out to me because you have the test coming up right around the corner, and I want to make sure that you know what to do going into that test.